So guys, you may commonly hear the expression that the ego is the cause of all suffering when it comes to spirituality. It's certainly something that Eckhart Tolle talks about, which I reference in a lot of my videos. But they say, so the spiritual ego is the idea of using spirituality to only feed the ego. As we know, the illusory self is, the ego self is the illusory self, the I we identify with, and the story we create that tells us about ourselves, that we tell about ourselves. That's the ego. And many people will phrase it and no doubt define it in different ways. I should probably do a video on that, just on ego as a concept itself. But what I wanted to point out, because all my videos are talking about the awakening phase, like the different phases you go through while waking up. And spiritual ego is something I have first-hand experience with. It is like the ego on crack, except for having not only having a big ego, you also have this idea that you're not only special in the material and the physical sense, but you're also special and more self-righteous and special than others in a divine sense, in a spiritual sense, in a sense of having powers and mystical abilities that no one else knows about. In fact, I used to call myself Mystic Stevens, believe it or not. I had an old Instagram account. I think it's the one, my private one actually, but it used to be called Mystic Stevens, literally, because I had this idea and this absurd notion that I had all these special powers. And really, guys, I think it's more to do with your intention rather than anything else. But in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience with the spiritual ego, ways you might be falling into the ego trap, because during this awakening, the ego is diminishing, but it will try and sneak in through the back door. And you will likely fall for some of these ego traps, which are very common, and it's just good to be aware of, to avoid. And ultimately, another way to avoid it is just thinking of yourself as not a special someone who's caused the awakening, rather the awakening experiences you've been lucky enough to be experiencing it. So change that feeling of self-righteousness, if you have any, into more of a feeling of gratitude just for being now allowed to experience all this and the sort of things I talk about in my videos. So yeah, guys, the spiritual ego is a weird one because in some ways you're doing things which are naturally due to diminish your ego, yet you're coming into more of an ego. But I think this is a transitional phase. Like I talk about, there's a lot of phases, a lot of transitions you're going to experience. And it's very common to initially fall into the ego trap when you are experiencing a lot that, especially if you're not prepared for, especially if you're trying to cause an awakening, perhaps you're trying to raise Kundalini energy, doing something very intense, a very intense process you're initiating in yourself. And although you might believe in spirituality, you might not have experienced it firsthand, let's say. You might not have experienced things that are outside of what we conceive of in society as normal reality. So if you haven't had these experiences, when you do have the experiences, part of your mind struggles to believe it, which is totally normal, and part of it rationalizes it into something that makes sense, such as the ego, where you're thinking, oh, maybe I'm special, maybe I've got special powers. That's probably easier to conceive in your mind than it is to conceive that there are all these things out there, there are all these abilities, and everyone has this potential in them. It's easier to perceive, to have maybe a positive ego, assuming that, oh, I'm special, I've got these special powers, maybe I'm different, I'm better than everyone. Or a negative ego thinking, oh, I'm going crazy, I'm going insane, there's something definitely wrong in my head. And you can fall into these two ego, brackets, and it does make more sense if it's easier to comprehend in your mind, because this isn't something that you go through your mind, this is more of a body and soul type experience. And your mind needs to yield and give way to an extent. And for me, like, I've had experiences of both. I've had experiences of being in that negative state, thinking I'm going crazy, seeking out, going to a counsellor while I was at university to talk about these experiences and having them have no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, I've also talked about these experiences with a Buddhist monk in where I went to university, and he took me to where there's a huge meditation center, and he said, this is really good, this is really encouraging actually what you're going through. So there's reasons for both me to believe I was a bit special, let's just say the least. And I think the easiest way to get a spiritual ego, which you want to avoid obviously, is doing spirituality with the wrong intentions. And what I mean by that is that you fall into something we call an ego trap, where the ego sneaks up on you and you suddenly get a feeling, a good feeling, but it's a feeling which makes you feel better than other people. So therefore it's an ego trap. It's not working for the benefit of all, like this awakening is. This awakening ultimately is raising the frequency of the earth, enabling you to be a healer. And if you do have gifts, if you are discovering powers, they're there so that you can help other people. Now, is the spiritual ego going to happen to everyone? No, I doubt it. All right, the reason it happened to me, and I'm definitely sure of this, is that I came into learning spirituality with a curiosity for sure, an appreciation, but also a feeling of wanting some more power, wanting something extra. And this led me to have a really dark experience where I had to confront these inner needs that I actually wanted, such as a bit more power, some ability to be different and maybe feel better than other people. All of that got confronted in a very, very strong way. So guys, if you're going into this, if you're feeling like you're waking up, you're having these ideals, I'm going to be really special, better than these people. It may feel good for a time to ride that a bit, but you're going to have it's going to be cost you a lot on the back end. May feel good initially, just like taking a drug spikes you up, but you're going to pay for it on the back end. And what I paid for it was I had to confront my whole personality. I had to go to deeper layers of myself. I had to experience an extreme amount of guilt and shame for having those ideals, for wanting to be more powerful and all this and all that. And it cost me a lot. And it led to ultimately me feeling like I was top of a friendship group, and for that friendship group completely falling apart, and for me feeling pretty worthless, like I had no one. So you're going to pay for it, guys. That's what I'm saying. I think that's the balance of the universe. I think it's about karma. I won't go into too much details, but you will pay for it. If that is your intention, if you have the wrong intentions, guys, I must warn you, you will pay for it. If you have the right intentions, you want to do good by the world, you want to share your gifts, it might be different, and just likely you may be able to avoid the spiritual ego. But much more subtle ways of getting a spiritual ego, of finding you have one, are falling into subtle ego traps that we have. So one example is, say you're waking up and you're realizing you're much more sensitive, and you realize that you don't resonate with a lot of stuff that you might have thought you resonated with before. Maybe you don't like drinking alcohol anymore, it puts you off. You don't want to eat meat anymore, completely puts you off. It's because your frequency is coming up, and it's natural to feel this way. And you're going into environments and you're feeling anger and resentment of certain people. You're more aware of people's traumas because you've dealt with your traumas, or you're dealing with your trauma, and you're more aware of what sets other people off, what triggers other people in society. So now you want to avoid that. And part of the avoidance, you may build a resentment towards them, or a feeling, if you've dealt with your trauma, say, that you're better than that person. So that's an ego trap you can fall into. Just be aware of that subtle feeling of superiority. What's your drive for making you want to do and practice and be involved with spiritual things, certain religions, certain practices? Do you collect crystals because you do feel the difference in energy, you do feel drawn to them? Or do you want to do that because you want to get rid of bad energy, you want to be different to other people? See where the subtlety lies? Do you go around visiting ashrams and reading spiritual texts because you're motivated to be different from everyone else and be on a higher level than everyone else? Or do you do it because it feels like your soul's calling you towards it? Because you have that natural interest, you have that natural inquiry, you want to grow more, you want to develop, you want to change yourself. Not for the benefit of other people, for the approval of other people, but just because you want to experience that. You want to experience the sort of experiences that are talked about in spiritual texts. Notice the subtlety and try not to fall in those ego traps. Now we've dealt with the ideas of falling into ego traps, I'm going to talk about something which is even more of a grey area, and that is, where does this, you might think, Louis, if I don't feel like I've done a great job and I'm better from where I was, or better than the people I used to surround myself with, which were negative influences, then how do I feel like I'm on the right path, like I'm doing good? Because obviously it's important to have a good self-esteem, because you want to come into this space where you have much more confidence, inner peace. That's all part of getting rid of this. After all, we're doing all this inner work. We're getting rid of our traumas, getting rid of our negative emotions, and completing these cycles of pain forever, so we can leave them behind and embody a much greater state of peace, of ease, of grace, and of confidence. So yeah, it's hard. I mean, the feeling of confidence must come from within. Ultimately, you've got to rely less and less on the external and draw that state from within. So draw that ease, draw that grace, draw what you feel, that peace from within. You need to be picky, I think, about you. You need to put yourself in the right external environment. But ultimately, you're getting to this point where you can be completely emotionally grounded, for one thing, yet also be able to make yourself feel good in your body. You want to have that sort of emotional state control so that you can be in any external environment and be strong enough to withstand it. Now, there's some of you who might be watching very empathic and pick up on other people's energy. But on this channel, I talk about, I'm going to put more content out, which I think is really important, of being able to draw boundaries and using your gift of empath, because it's a complete gift. If you're empathetic with others, you can help others, but really only channeling it, only accessing that when you're in the right company, when you're in the right space. You've got to learn how to draw up boundaries. So I'm going to do another video on that, guys. That'll be coming out soon. I've got to do a lot more research on it first, because I want it to be a really good one. But back to the topic. So you might be thinking now, okay, Louis, you've got over your superego. How did you do it? So how I did it mainly was, humbling myself, ultimately. Being very vulnerable when I felt bad and no longer putting up this... I was ultimately felt like it got to the point where the spiritual ego took so much of a hold that I felt like I was just performing in front of others. Bad situation to be in, right? So I felt like I was performing in front of others. I'd grown into a very inauthentic state, and I'd ultimately lost contact and lost touch with my body. My mind and body connection had been severed. And guys, this is why I always talk about it's so key for clearing, for inner work, for getting rid of this, is to tap into your body, release those pockets of tension, and do the clearing. So if I'd lost control, if I had lost contact with my body, ultimately I need to refine it again. And what it took me to refine it was a severe hermit stage. What it took for me to refine it was a severe hermit phase where I completely cut myself off, stayed mainly isolated, and finally refound my body again. And once I did that, then I felt like who I thought I was finally somewhere. I was finally grounded. So regrounding is so important. Gonna have more videos coming up on regrounding. So I finally regrounded myself and dealt with the roots of where the spiritual ego came from, which was those intentions for my basically dark desires to be powerful, to be special, to be known, to be approved of. I dealt with that. And that's when your esteem, so it's actually dealing with the spiritual ego and dealing with the ego that your real self-esteem can come through. The spiritual ego was just a scar tissue on top of the wound. And I had to heal the wound that was deep down. And it took a lot of inner work, and it took a lot of hermit phase, took a long hermit phase, took a lot of inner work to heal that. The initial root, the initial cause of those intentions, and of me wanting to be that person, wanting to be that superego that I couldn't actually live up to. And I had to release. It's about releasing those desires and finding out and discovering that inner peace. And you will find it, you will get there. If you believe you have a superego now, you will get there. Do what you want to do. Just for you. So to avoid falling into those ego traps. Another way, guys, to get rid of that is just transitioning that mindset into, I'm not a special person. Okay, gray area, you are special, of course you're special, right? But you are not this divine, greater than everyone else person. You are someone, we are people that have been blessed with a very special process. We are embodying a special process, but it doesn't make us special. That sense of us, that ego, is not special. Spiritual ego is thinking that ego is special. No. We are all special, but we are all special. So it doesn't make you relatively more special than anyone else, okay? We're experiencing a special process that's happening. I'm not special, but thank God, thank the universe, I am experiencing something that is special, okay? Putting that distance, putting that space between you allows you to stay grounded. If I start thinking I'm special, it's gonna go crazy. So you might be thinking, Louis, okay, you're on YouTube though. What are the intentions behind that? I promise the intentions are to help people that were in my position a few years ago. That's where my intention come from. Yeah, I've been thinking there is that issue of, okay, I do want to look good, I want to look presentable on camera while I do this. You know, I want to put together a good video. I want to come across well to you guys so that my channel can hopefully grow and help many people. How many people? Not too many. Because I understand myself. This process helped me know myself. And I know that if I get big, if this channel becomes really big, I would be scared of that ego resurfacing. I do believe if the channel does grow quite significantly, that there will be phases I go through. I trust that this process will create phases for me where there's continual breakdowns of my ego. So I get something, my ego goes up, and then I reground it, I work through it, I release it. I trust that sort of process will happen. But I do believe if I get to millions of people, I mean, it would be a blessing in one sense, but it would also be a curse, because I do think that my ego would get out of control, and that super ego would re-emerge, of that feeling like it was divine providence that I get very popular. So that wouldn't be good. But the intentions are this: I feel like I've been given some gifts. I'm experiencing a very special process, like your mindset should be. Your mindset shouldn't be, of course it shouldn't be, of course it shouldn't be, this is terrible what's happening, it's great what's happening. It's a very special process. Thank God we're experiencing it. So grateful. But ground it, okay? Don't want to be getting spiritual ego. Believe me, I've been there. Don't let it get out of control, guys. Just go with the flow, all right? Anyway, guys, it's starting to get dark a little bit. It's the evening time here in Essex, England. So I'm going to leave it with that. Bless you all. Keep grounded, guys. There's 6 billion people on the earth. Think about what they might be doing as well right now. Blessings, 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 guys. Goodbye.